Greetings, duelists, and welcome to another video. Duelist Nexus is right around the corner. We're still like a week and a half away for its release. We still have a few deck and strategies we still need to cover. Um, we already covered Infernoble Knights, Rescue Ace, the Adventure Synchron deck. Um, Another deck that has been popping around, no pun intended, and has been shown into a lot of testing groups and a lot of like testing duels with people, and is doing a little bit better than expected. It's Unchained. For those who don't know, Unchained is an archetype that debuted. I think it was on Chaos Impact, which was a long time ago. That's pretty much when IP Masquerena came out. And it's basically a fiend themed archetype involving monsters that have all floating effects. And they try to like take advantage out of popping your own cards as well as your opponent. I'm not gonna be showing the new cards. I'm not gonna be talking about a lot about strategies involving them. Other YouTubers are already doing that. Um, I could make a separate video involving like duels and strategies involving people playing that strategy. But what I've been going to be doing is just give you the ground up about what the deck does, um, what the cards integral to a strategy are, and how should you be doing deck building when the new cards come out. Shoutouts to One Rocky Boy. I don't own any Unchained card. These are all his. Um, he pretty much lended me all the Unchained stuff that he had, so I could properly make this video for you guys. But yeah, without further ado, let's begin. So right now, as of right now, before Duelist Nexus, we have through pretty much a few main deck monsters. Those are being Aruha, Rakeya, Sarama, um, Abomination, Unchained Soul, and the Unchained Soul of Disaster. So to explain everything, um, these three all activate when they are destroyed to summon another Unchained monster. Adding to that, they do have another effect that involves popping your own cards. Ruha can target a card you control and blow it up to special summon itself. Rakeya, as a quick effect, can target anything uh, and destroy it. Basically, anything you control, specifically. Um, Sarama is a weird one. Sarama, the way it works is that you target an unchained card from your graveyard, you set it, and then you blow up something. Um, Abomination on Soul, basically, what it does is you can special summon it from hand if an unchained, if a card is destroyed. And if this card is special summoned, you can discard a card to blow up a card, and it doesn't target. It does have another effect in the graveyard. Instead of floating into another Unchained like these three, this one can bring itself back from the graveyard. However, you can only special summon it once per turn. So if you do a special summon it via its hand effect or from any of these guys, you won't be able to bring it back from the grave in the same turn. Um, and Disaster is a linchpin of the deck. You don't ever want to draw this card, but what this card does is that it can target a monster from your opponent, and you can link summon using it and this one for an Unchained, um, which is really really cool. Like that's pretty much like one core strategy that you have with them. You pretty much want to try to use your resources, but as well you want to use your opponent's resources. Um, so there has to be a catch because they can't all just work that same way that I just mentioned. There is a few discrepancies that we have to mention. If you use Aruha's popping effect to special from hand, you are locked into Fiend summons for the rest of the turn. If you use Rakea's quick effect, you're also locked into Fiends. And Sarama does not have a Fiend lock restriction. However, you cannot. Sarama does not trigger to specials from deck if it's destroyed by battle. It's only if it's destroyed by card effect. And another special note that I have to make is if they're popped by their own effects, they don't get to trigger. So if you, for example, Sarama set up an Unchained and then pop itself, it won't get to trigger to summon from the deck. Same thing with Rakea, same thing with Aruha. So yeah, that's pretty much covered. So what do you want to be doing with this deck? So there are two different ways for you to play Unchained. You can either go second as a board breaking strategy and just try to pick apart your opponent's board using your monsters as resources and just try to vomit as many monsters on the board as possible and just try to start slowly grinding advantage that way. Or the other method is you can play it as a trap version of this deck. Basically, you can just play a bunch of back row and hand traps, and you can just start like gaining advantage of your opponent slowly, and while picking apart their board, be it by effects like the link monsters. I'll get to the extra deck in a moment. I'll explain that as I go along, and I'll also show some examples of cards that you can tech into your Unchained strategy, whether you pick one route or the other route. So when it comes to deck building, how many of these you should be running? You should be maxing out on all the level 3s because the level 3s are what's going to like start your plays. You don't want to ever draw this card, but you do want to play in the deck because there are a lot of strategies involving it. Including your link monsters. Once DUNE Nexus comes out, this will be way less important because you will be able to like start picking up your opponent's board by other means. They will be easier. However, as of right now, you still have to play this at least at one copy. This card is really, really important. This card is really, really strong. Its effect to destroy a card does not target. You can do this during the damage step. It has 3k attack, so and any of these guys can summon it. So I feel like this monster is really, really important, at least at multiple copies, just because of how impactful the card is if it resolves. And so those are it for the monsters. On DUNE Next, when DUNE Nexus comes out, you will have two more new main deck monsters. One is basically the disaster version of Aruha, and the other one is the disaster version of Rakea, and then you'll have another link monster. I'm trying to remember all their names. I know the Aruha version is called Chavara. And I think the Rakea version is called Sayama. And I know that the link monster is called Unchained Soul King Yama. I think those are the names. I could be wrong on one of them. But TLDR, they're really, really strong. They pretty much like help tutor into your other cards quickly, and like they're also big, not as big as this one, but they're like 2k attack and they're level 6, which is a very important level in the future. But yeah, those are the main deck monsters. at least until Duelist Nexus comes out. So let's talk about their spell and traps because they do have a couple of them. We have Abomination's Prison. We have Escape of the Unchained, and then we have Chamber of the Unchained, Abominable Chamber. So they all have a floating effect, same way the monsters do. If they're destroyed, any of them can special summon an Unchained from deck. So pretty much, almost the entire deck can tutor itself, which is very very important. It kind of makes the deck really consistent on that regard, and you do already have ways that can make it so you can pop these cards, mainly like the Aruha and the Rakea. Once Duelist Nexus comes out, the other monsters will also have effects that will make it so you can pop your own cards to tutor themselves easier. So as of now, you play 3 staples of these. Now I'll talk about their field effects. Abomination's Prison can add any Unchained card. So it's basically Rhoda. Escape of the Unchained, basically what it does is that it targets an Unchained card you control, or and one monster your opponent controls, or one card your opponent controls, rather, any card, and you can pop both. And Chamber, what it does is that it can bring back an Unchained from your graveyard. So it's kind of important to max out on all these, mainly because again, the deck is very very good at what it does. You want to be tutoring out and cycling through these cards as much as possible. Another important note is that Sarama can set any of them. So not only does this also set monsters, you can also set the spell and traps. Another important side note that I have to make is that Abomination's Prison is not an Unchained card, sadly. So sadly, you cannot tutor it with the Sarama. You cannot add it with any of these guys. It cannot add itself. But yeah, it's like Konami was very smart on deck building when it came to like this card, just to make sure like it wasn't abused as much. But on hindsight, you could have made the argument that it could have been better if it was an Unchained card. But yeah, those are the ratios of the Unchained cards, at least the main deck ones. You kind of want to max out all of these, and you want to max out on all the level 3s. And as for the bigger names, you want to like play a certain number copy of them. Once Duelist Nexus comes out, you're going to invoke at least 4 main deck slots. That would be 3 for the Shavara and 1 for the blue one. So, if we do the main deck count right now, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, plus the 4 I just mentioned. That'll be 26. So you'll have to dedicate 26 main deck slots for your Unchained cards, which is very very good. I think having 14 spots for like utility and non-engine, it's a really good number. It gives you the ability to play either the trap version or the board breaking version with hand traps and stuff. So now let's talk about cards that you can play in the deck. I don't have everything for them. Like, I'm just going to show a few examples. This is pretty much like, again, shoutouts to One Rocky Boy. This is like the current list that he was playing. So there is a lot of things that it could be a lot different, and when Duelist Nexus comes out, this deck will be a lot different. I guess I'll also talk about like another hybrid that you can play alongside this strategy once I get to like showing a few of the cards. So one card that you can be play in this deck is Part of Extravagance. I haven't covered the extra deck yet. I will get to that point, but outside of a few key cards, the extra deck is very manageable. Your main strategy is with your main deck monsters, especially with the Abomination Soul, the level 8 one. So you can afford to just have a +1 used if you try to go this approach. You can also play Prosperity for the same reason. Um, the only thing to take note of when it comes to Prosperity is that um, you can only do half damage, so it will be very hard for you to like OTK your opponent if you do choose the board breaking approach. Some people like OTKing with the deck, some people don't. I'm fine with either or, but yeah. Um, Another really cool thing you can do with this deck is play Kaijus. The reason we're talking about we chose Radiant specifically is because it is a fiend monster. Um, so remember that Rakeya and Aruha lock you into fiends if you do their effect. So this makes it so you can still kaiju your opponent even after the fiend lock. Another important note is that one of the extra deck monsters, again, I'll talk about that when we go along, does have the ability to recur fiend monsters from the graveyard, and the new Link 2 that comes out in Duelist Nexus can also make it so you can special summon the fiend from your graveyard. So this has a lot of utility in the deck. It's very risky against Kashtira because it is level 7. But my logic with Kaijus is always that if you're Kaijuing a Kashtira player, you're trying to break their board. If you Kaiju them and you don't break their board, that means your game plan didn't stick, and they're still in like more advantage than you are. Um, and I can tell you this right now: once you play this deck, you will figure it out. Unchained is really good at breaking boards. It's like no contest. Um, so this card's going to be very unorthodox. You can play hand traps in this deck. Ash Blossom works fine. Droll Logbird works fine. Um, like Veiler, Imperm. You can do all of those hand traps if you so wish. One hand trap that people don't think is good in this deck, um, and it's good for you to if you're watching this video because it pretty much can give you an insight whenever you're playing this strategy. So one hand trap is Dimension Shifter. Um, so it is true that all the Unchained cards do revolve around being destroyed. However, most of them just need to be destroyed in order to tutor out others from the deck. Um, they don't need to be sent to graveyard. They just need to be destroyed, period. Which is really strong, meaning that they can play around Dimension Shifter easier than other decks. Um, Ironically, the new DUNE cards are more susceptible to Shifter. However, Shifter is still a very good option in your deck because it will catch a lot of decks off guard and it hurts them way more than it does hurt you. Obviously, we're in a format where Kashtira is very popular, and Branded is still like a strategy that's being played, which is a deck that can play around this card. So this card I don't think is main deck worthy. However, when Duelist Nexus releases, a lot of new strategies from Duelist Nexus are going to be decks that are going to be weaker into Shifter. Um, Prime examples are Infernoble Knights, Purely, and the Adventure Synchron deck. So, if you're playing Unchained, I highly recommend this card. at least in the side deck. So I'm going to now talk about the trap version. Um, Something that you can do in this deck is basically just play like a good amount of traps that do have popping effects. Like for example, Torrential Tribute is a good board clearing card, but the really strong upside is that it destroys your own cards. So it makes it so your Unchained monsters um, will float, and you start picking apart your opponent's board bit by bit, more easily than not. Um, I already brought up Imperm. Like Imperm is just another good trap in general that you can play here. Um, so what one Rocky Boy was doing is that he was also playing Dogmatica Punishment. He was playing Dimensional Barrier. Um, he was playing the Ruma Cannon. These are all really strong options. Um, he was also playing Eradicator. The way Eradicator works is that the Abomination Soul, the level 8, is 3000 attack. So it's easy fodder for this card. And it's super easy to summon in the deck. You do have other monsters in your set that can also facilitate that. If you end up summoning the Kaiju on your board, it's also 2800, so it works with Eradicator. But the one card that ties this all together is one card that came out in Cyberstorm Axis. Really underrated card, and the card is called Trap Tracks. So, what does Trap Tracks do? It basically targets one card, one monster you control, you destroy it, and then you can set any of these trap cards. It can set any normal trap, and it can be activated that turn. It does have the same restriction as Trap Trick, where the next activation will be just one more trap. However, I think this is really, really strong because just having access to any normal trap in the game is really, really powerful. Like we already seen Labyrinth doing very, very well at premier events, and one of the main reasons for that is because they have a way of tutoring into their normal trap cards and just stifling a pressure against your opponent with them. So don't be don't be too surprised if you do see Unchained players take this approach. I think Labyrinth has a better fundamental use and reason of using this approach more than Unchained, but Unchained is one that is more unexpected. Another really strong thing to mention is uh, Labyrinth does have a good amount of synergy with Unchained because the Labyrinth monsters are Fiend monsters. So once the Duelist Nexus cards come out, like Soul King Yalma, for example, um, those cards can interact with your Labyrinth cards a lot easier. And one thing important to note is that you do play two normal traps in your deck. There are Unchained cards, so you have even more copies of them if you do choose the Trap Track approach or the Labyrinth approach or any combination of both. Um, so that's it for the main deck, at least the way you can incorporate it. Let's talk about the extra deck. Um, so the most important ones are Unchained Soul of Rage, Unchained Soul of Anguish, and and Unchained Abomination. So what do these do? Um, so the Soul of Rage, what it does is you can target one monster special summon from your opponent during their main phase, and you can link summon using this and that monster into any dark link monster. So it could be Anguish, it could be Abomination, it could even be stuff like Nightmare Unicorn, or stuff like Access Code, just to give a few examples. Also take note that Nightmare Unicorn is a Fiend monster, so it does synergize with the deck still, and you can still summon this even under the Fiend lock. Unchained Soul of Anguish does the same thing as the Unchained Soul of Rage. However, this does it during your own turn instead of your opponent's turn. But yeah. Another thing is these two have floating effects. However, unlike the main deck monsters, the level 3s, instead of summoning from the deck, these grab a Fiend monster from your graveyard. And this any Fiend monster. Now you understand why the Radiant Kaiju is in the graveyard, is in the deck. Now you understand why the Labyrinth monsters can synergize with these cards as well. Another approach that you can do is play the Life Twin monsters, because the Kissikel and the Lila, they basically lock you into Fiends as well, and that doesn't interfere with any of these. And if you do summon the Lila and the other one, and you also play like the Trouble Sunny, those are other forms of interruption that you can use. Also, they can help pop your own cards as well, so it kind of helps you on that regard. And like all the extra deck monsters from the Life Twins are Fiend monsters, so they also can help summon the Soul King Yama. So now you're starting to see like the synergy with like all those different archetypes in this one. So the last Unchained monster we'll be covering is the Unchained, the Abominable Unchained. So the Abominable Unchained, what it does is, during the end phase, you can destroy a card. And it's either player's main phase. The other one is if a card on the field is destroyed. That also includes during the damage step. You can destroy a card. Also, if a card is destroyed by effect, except during the damage step, you can also destroy a card. So essentially, you can end up destroying up to 3 cards during the turn with the Abomination Soul, if you do end up summoning it. And this is really strong because it synergizes with your deck, because you'll be popping your own cards a lot during both your turn and your opponent's turn. So every time any of those things happen, this will have the ability to trigger. So as of right now, you have 3, 5, 7 monsters in your extra deck. Once the Soul King Yama comes out in Duelist Nexus, there will be 2 extra spots. So that will be 9, and that will give you room for at least 6 monsters in your extra deck. Now you're starting to see why Pot of Extravagance or Pot of Prosperity are fine in this deck. Link climbing into these is not your main win condition. Your main win condition is just controlling your opponent with your main deck. However, if you do get to the point where you do summon your extra deck monsters, then it'll be just as good. As you already saw in the main deck, Dogmatica Punishment was there, so stuff like the Cloud Beast, Aggregator, and Entis are options. One other really good monster that I do highly recommend if you're playing Unchained would be the Underworld Goddess. The main reason for this is that purely is going to be a very popular deck. You will be seeing people summoning the Noir with multiple materials on your turn, and you do want to find a way to easily get rid of it, because there are no real easy ways to get rid of it outside of stuff like this. However, it is super easy for your deck to spam monsters on the board, and it pretty much puts the purely player on the spot. It pretty much puts them on either start picking apart your board, which makes their Expert Noir more vulnerable, or they don't interact with your board, and then you just catch them off guard because the Underworld Goddess will just eat away the Noir. And she is a Fiend monster, so you can summon her under the Fiend lock. I already brought up Unicorn, and I already brought up Access Code. This is just another copy of the Entis. So yeah, this was a very very lengthy video, but I know that some people are not familiar with Unchained, at least people who are watchers of this channel, and I just want to make sure that people understand how this deck functions. That way, when they're facing the strategy in the future, or you see the new cards in action, or like you have at least a fundamental idea on how the deck works. Also, if you're interested in Unchained, this might be a helpful video for you, because now you know the fundamentals, you know exactly what you should be doing with your deck. And like, I think like on the DUNE format, this is a very very strong pick. I think this is a strategy that can easily catch a lot of people off guard, because not many people know how to face against it. This is a really really good board breaking deck. Like, I've seen this deck plow through like 4 to 5 negates and like multiple interruptions, and a lot of monster interruptions involve destruction, which is very favorable for you because your monsters do float, which makes a lot of opponents' cards that try to use against you very much obsolete. But yeah, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you found this very informative. Stay tuned, a lot more coming soon. Keep practicing and keep dueling.